on the billies and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland will never give it up to another nation. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland will never give it up to another nation. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland will never give it up to another nation. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area.
Greetings and good morning. Oh my gosh, I don't know if Dyon looked like how it looked to me, but it looked extremely bright. But
bright and stretchy.
Yes. Anyways, welcome to the second edition of Sunday Review, Belize's only news review talk show for 2023 Gregorian cycle. I'm the producer and host, YaYa Marin Coleman, and our tag is "This is where we make sense of the news." And so, thanks for being with us. We are simulcasting on Krem Radio and live streaming on Krem Television Facebook page. Our guest this morning. Last and what she has at the beg brother for come up on the show is my beloved brother, Dyon Elliott. In this capacity, he will be having a conversation with us as the editor-in-chief at the Reporter newspaper in Belize. Morning, Dyon. Good to see you, brother.
Good morning, yeah. And yes, you're nothing else. You're very consistent and determined. I think you've been at this like the last time I was here was what, maybe 2017, 20.
Yes.
Give it that time. You've never given up. So
no, because you're one of the few, for me, one of the few young brothers who I find to be naturally curious, well-read, confident, and an expert in your field, as far as I'm concerned, besides public policy analysis, when it comes to dollars and cents. Now, we may not always agree, and I like a healthy disagreement. One of the things I really appreciate with Dyon is that he is, which I love, empirical research, thy fuel. And he really has a knack, as we listen to on today, for just, I'm just like, how the hell do you remember Arlen thing? And just boom, boom, boom. But I really value you being here today. As the editor-in-chief at The Reporter, tell us what a day is like for you. Paper come out Friday. What's a day like for you on a Thursday?
Oh, we're going straight to the jugular, no? The Thursday. Well, let me start like this, and I'll come back to that. Like one of the reasons because as people will know, yes, I wear, some of those who know me know I wear multiple hats. So the editor-in-chief in the Reporter newspaper is one of. I have another hat that I also wear in terms, that's where the policy analysis come in, which I'm not representing that organization today. But one of the reasons why I stick with media is because I believe in the role of the media in guiding development and development policy. I remember years ago, it was in a 2004 paper called Read All About It, the media's role in economic policy development. And ever since then, I've read that it really just fueled why I stick with the media, because honestly, there is that medium, the media, that needs to guide the people to understand what's happening. And that's why your show, YaYa, is making sense of the news. The context of it is very important. Really, it doesn't start on Thursday, it culminates on Thursday. Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it culminates on Thursdays. Really, we start with assigning news, of course. Sometimes we're a small team, so I end up writing in many instances myself. But I have a small team that gets out there, do the news, we assign the news, they bring their ideas. I tend to try to take the different approach when it comes to covering news. You would know that under my tenure as editor, you would hardly not see the usual emphasis on what was, usual crime news and that type of stuff, because I'm convinced that a lot of other policy issues are going under the radar. And so we need to focus on that. But on Thursday, it's usually editing the stories. It's the late night. In the past, you used to go home midnight. That's early, actually. If you ever go home midnight, you're printing. Sometimes you have late breaking stories, so that's keeping you back sometimes. That lately that has eased up quite a bit. It's gotten a little bit easier with news, and we're not producing the same number of pages that we used to. I want to get us back there, but the industry itself is struggling. But a lot of reading, a lot of editing, in many cases, a lot of rewriting. So yeah, that's basically the day.
How has COVID-19 impacted your work as the editor?
The work itself hasn't changed. What it impacted the industry. The industry, as I don't know, you may know this already, the newspaper print industry globally is suffering from the rise of digital media. Things are going online, and also ads are migrating that direction. I think most people who are familiar with the industry knows that print ads are the main bread and butter source of revenue for entities that are newspapers. But when you have the rise of digital, then comes COVID, where a lot of businesses were struggling to keep the lights on. So what happens then? They have to make decisions on where they put their dollars. And if they realize that they could advertise cheaper online, that a lot of them started doing that. We're seeing some return as the economy recovers. So I always jokingly say, and I probably might move it from a joke and start saying, if I ever want to do economic forecast, maybe a good place to start looking is ad sales in newspapers, because you get a good litmus test of how the economy is doing, judging from where the ads are. But COVID definitely impacted on revenue, in addition to everything else that has been happening to the industry globally.
How do you select what stories will be covered? Like, what process do you go through to select what stories will be covered and the position that story will be covered from?
That's a beautiful question. I understand that I learned journalism. I've been the reporter going on 13 years in one form or the other. And I learned, or at least the readings that I originally got and the lessons that I got was from Mr. Harry Lawrence. And he's old in the game, let's just put it like that. So I tend to carry a lot of the traditional views for journalism. I still hold the view that journalism is the rampart against despotism, and it's about, democracy and freedom and blah, blah, blah. All those usual ethical things that you're supposed to be talking about in journalism. And selecting the news, there are things known as the news value criteria. I'm certain you're familiar with them. I'm just going to explain them for the benefit of the listeners and viewers.
Me, I know where to talk about.
Really?
Just like the rest. No,
well,
that teaching.
Well, there are news value criteria. There are things known as new value criteria. I tend to stick with the traditional NVC's news value criteria, but there are contemporary versions of it. But for me, I stick with the traditional, and the traditional ones are impact. The more people affected by something, the stronger likelihood for that to be making news. The second one is conflict. Anything conflict. Politics is conflict. Crime is conflict, and whatnot. Sports has an element of conflict in it. You also have prominence. Names make news. That's why it is. That's why the prime minister and ministers and leaders of the oppositions and famous people can consistently make news. So you can't get enough of hearing about Donald Trump in the United States, because names make news. So prominence. Oddity or novelty, things that are strange. The old saying here goes, when a dog bites a man, okay, whatever, that happens all the time. But when a man bites a dog, okay, that makes news because it's odd, it's strange. In a small country like this other value doesn't matter much. It's proximity. Things happening close to you tend to get more heavier coverage than things that are figuratively or geographically far. And then, of course, there's timeliness. More recent news tend to make news. So my gauge is the stories that carry most of those NVCs tend to naturally lend themselves to being stronger proponents or potential front page stories, at least in the front page, and then they determine where else they go in the paper. So now, I said earlier, because of my focus on policy, so yes, there's a policy bias on, in terms of how I approach news. because I don't know if you noticed this, YaYa, but news tend to be almost cyclical in this country. It's like everywhere, but especially here in Belize. Like you find that almost every start of a new year, you will have one story about some child going to school, but the here, it repeats itself. You have a fire, and wait for it. Set your watch by. Somebody's going to say that 9 times, 7 times, to 9 times out of 10, somebody will make the point that they showed up without water, or there wasn't water to deal with the fire. And just track it. You'll be around long enough, you notice that certain things repeat. You had the drug plane landing every so often, you almost want to set your watch by then. And so what my thing is okay, we have these recurring problems. So I would tell my team, all right, what is it that is causing these problems to recur? And how do we deal with them? What policy issues are the lack of policy or the lack of solutions that are causing this? Drug plane keeps on landing, for example. Where's the primary radar that's supposed to be able to track these planes better? Yes, we get our data out of Mexico and Guatemala, but where is our own stuff? So I will challenge my team, we need to look into that. Anyway, so that's the idea. So it's based around news value criteria. And the goal is to try and improve Belize one story at a time. That's the mantra that I try to live by. Like, okay, yes, we need to report what happened. That is good. But I don't want to just cover the news and then a year later we're doing the same thing again and asking ourselves as a society, how is it that we have not improved even by an inch this particular area of concern? I hope that answered your question.
Well, that was a mouthful. I appreciate it. You answered my last question I wanted to ask you as it relates to your responsibilities as the editor-in-chief at The Reporter. How does your personal bias bleed into your work? Because that happens. And so I would tell people I identify as a community organizer and a grassroots journalist. That means the things that are of interest to me would not generally make traditional news. And my bias is African descendants people racialized as Black people. That's my priority. So I declare that. So when you hear me talk, you don't we're human. If more of us would declare our biases or even our prejudices, it would make for more healthier dialogue. So what's your you have any other bias?
Well, national development is a bias of mine. That's a given. Like you rightly said earlier, we may disagree about how we reach that goal. Like poverty bothers me. That's a big issue. Like you have a country, yes, using only the income statistic, but you have an issue. You have a country that's gone from 33.5% to 41.3% to 52% poverty in 2 decades. There has to be something wrong with that. And
Dyon, you have to say that again. Okay, know how I feel about about percentage. But when I get to the whole numbers, but pretty much really say when you said 2 decades, that are in 20 years. You say we got from 30-something% to 50-something%. And I prefer using the word impoverishment because of we might not agree, but my lens is that because of the economic model we choose, which we get from the enslavers, the capitalist model where it's important for shareholders or owners to get a large profit, which is disproportionate to what people are paid or the benefits they get, that it's because of the system why people not have one adequate level of living. So they're made poor. It's not that people are you're born into conditions of impoverishment because of colonial systems of oppression. So that's why I encourage, especially media workers, to use the word impoverishment, because like you're victimizing the people. I'm not saying the people don't have any responsibility, but until we do the kind of empirical research, and that's why I love reading and news stories and going in the archives, because it's storytelling. But it depends on who's telling the story, what's happening at that particular time at home, in the region, internationally, because it's all connected. So you're rare, because I don't know nobody else that believes we got that perspective and we're in the media.
Well, the thing is, I know where you stand in terms of the whole economic model stuff, and that's fine. I'm furthering my studies. I don't want to get into all of that up here. You know this, but it's a subfield of comparative economics, and I won't dwell on this here because that's not what we came here to talk about. But I encourage people to look up the subject line varieties of capitalism. Look up the name Peter Hall and David Suskis, and look up Professor Bruno Amable, and you get a sense that there's capitalism. Capitalism isn't capitalism, and you and I have had this discussion before, and I know you don't view that like that. But the fact is, the empirical work is in that area that they're different. Belize is not a liberal market economy like you see in the United States and other places. It's far more tilted towards what you would call a coordinated market economy, at least from what I am seeing looking at our design. You could even argue it's a mixed market economy within that genre of literature. But moving on, my point is this. When you, and there's a reason why I kind of preface with that. Because, and again, don't take my word for it, go look up the varieties of capitalism literature, folks. But the reason why I preface that is because within comparative literature, within comparative political economic literature, you will find that culture has a lot to play with institutions, and institutions ultimately shape your economic system. And I'm going here, or going there, because one of the pet peeves of mine, you want to talk about a bias I have, is the fact that we have a system in Belize where our people oftentimes have to line up in front of an area representative. I don't care if it's blue or red, I'm saying the entirety of our system. Have you lining up in front of an area representative for social assistance or social care? You need a scholarship, you need access to land, you need whatever. You have to go in front of whoever area rep is and hope that they will be so kind to you to give you back resources that are yours anyway. Ultimately, it's the people's resources. That is an issue for me because social protection systems, in any form that they take, should never have you standing up in front of a politician. I don't care if it's the most benevolent politician. I think there are good politicians out there. That should be a formal institutionalized system. You go to an office, you fill out a form, and an apparatus that is insulated from the political directorate does what it does. You get it if you qualify. Thing done. It shouldn't have to be, well, oh, yeah, the minister give me this, and I'm so grateful, and then put you on the picture and show. No. That is the bedrock for clientelism, or you want to tell me if I got that word down. That is the foundation for why there's this harsh trading going on between voters and politicians, whereby you're afraid to even speak up as one businessman or as an individual because you're afraid the minister take away or your area rep take away the resources that you have received from him. That is not that is eating away at your freedom as an individual. That is eating at your way as your freedom as in a democracy. That is utterly absurd. And then you want to know why is it that you can't get people to have these type of discussions that we're having more regularly? Because why bother think about it if I don't know? I just have to wait for the minister when an election comes around and I'm going to the to give me $1,000, then you sell your vote. So we need for that the one system that in my lifetime we need to see that changed. I gone from a tangent there, but I hope you're getting the point where they come from.
No. It's absolutely right on track with where we're going. No, I'm going to the bulk of the rest of the conversation. I'm enjoying the conversation, brother. We're going to be focusing on the $5 minimum wage because I don't know enough, and I figure more. We need to learn more. Because I'm a person who enjoys storytelling, especially as it relates to Belize's backstory. I like backstories. I wanted to read quickly. Jada, if you could bring up, wait, Jada, send a message in the chat. Oh no, it's Dyon. Okay. And Jada, if you could bring up quickly, I'll do two short reads from two different sources. The first is from Colonialism and Resistance in Belize, Essays in Historical Sociology by O. Nigel Boland. And this book was first published in 1988, second revised edition 2003, sixth revised edition 2016. I'm reading from I'll just read one paragraph from page 167. And this is under chapter 6, Labor Control and Resistance in Belize in the century after 1838. Most Belizeans should be familiar with 1838 now. August 1st, 1838 is when it is said that African descendants, racialized as Black people, uppercase B for Black, that we were legally liberated from the status of property, chattel enslavement. And so let me just read this. And this is important. Thanks, Jada. This is important because we don't know our past, so we don't have any value for the struggle, the sacrifice people made for us to be where we are in 2023, talking about a $5 minimum wage per hour for 40 hours work week. Go to that page 167, Jada. It says, after 1838, as before, Belizean workers, it says, after 1838, as before. That means during enslavement, people resisted. After 1838, as before, Belizean workers resisted labor coercion and expressed their dissatisfaction in various ways. The magistrates' records are full of convictions for absenteeism, disobedience, assaults on bookkeepers, and breaking contracts. And as we have seen, there were sometimes strikes. Occasionally, there were also demonstrations and riots, as in 1894, when mahogany workers returned to town from the camps to find that a currency devaluation had severely reduced their wages. The employers would not raise their wages, so a deputation led by John Alexander Tom went to the governor. When the governor refused to do anything, the workers rioted and looted stores. After British troops landed to quell the disturbances, the employers conceded to an increase in wages. Another riot occurred in 1999 when demobilized Belizean soldiers who had returned from the Great War in Europe attacked business establishments in protest against racist treatment. The most extensive, organized, and effective disturbances occurred in the mid-1930s. However, when Belize was shattered by economic depression and a hurricane, the brunt of which was felt by the working class, by working people. So no, this is from before 1838 and after 1838. So this is to contextualize, thanks Jada, this conversation so Belizeans know that we have a history. You can bring up the Ray one, Jada. We have a history as Belizean people of resisting and defending our interests. Only the people could save the people. So we'll talk about right here. The next one, we're gonna look upon the Ray, Nothing to Lose by Ray Lightburn. The first edition was in 2009. This got some juicy story, but I can't read all of them. I have a few of them for sale. These were donated to Belize. They're for $20 each. I think I got about 5 more left. We're going to look at chapter 2, a labor leader. This is Ray Lightburn's words, and that's why I like when people tell their own story instead of people telling a story for them. A labor leader on the waterfront. This might carry up to the 11 o'clock break, and then when we come back, we Dyon have one discussion with me. Continue the discussion, I should say. He's already having a discussion with us. On the waterfront, I was 21, a member of the Mesopotamia PUP committee, and a member of the People's United Party's Central Council, which governed the party with Mr. George Price as party leader. On the 13th of February, 1962, Mr. Price and Rogers met with Nicholas Pollard, Bishop Hodup, and a representative from the International Federation of Christian Trade Unions at the Holy Redeemer Presbytery, where the bishop gave his blessings to the formation of the Christian Workers Union. At the first inaugural meeting, a provisional council was set up with Nick Pollard as president, Desmond Vaughn as vice president, Mike Rosado as secretary, and I as national organizer. 2 days later, at our second meeting, Desmond Vaughn, who represented the waterfront workers, told the union that public opinion was against Mr. Pollard as president, so he was told to change position with me, and I became the president. Our first effort was to organize the waterfront workers, who were represented by the Christian Democratic Union, CDU, under Norman Lane Feaster, Leonard Jones, Dick Acosta, Marshall Nunes, that's the father of the Marshall Nunes, so we know, and Shuba Brown. A poll was held and we won by over 70% of the votes polled. Thus, we became the workers' representatives on the waterfront. We then started, no, this is 1962, you know, I get cool. See, this is 61 years ago. We then started negotiations with United Brands, United Food Company, the Belize Estate and Produce Company Limited, Param, Almia, Canton, and Robinson. The chief negotiator for BEC was Mr. Gordon Rowe, who was very experienced and skilled at the bargaining table. I learned a lot from him as how to negotiate. It was called the art of the possible. Check out this paragraph. Now, this is about only the people and save the people. Mr. Rowe later told me that he had no secrets to conceal, but if they gave a wage increase, it would be tacked on to the price of food, goods, and services, and as such, the cost of living would increase. It was their Christmas, and the merchants were depending on the ships to bring their goods from abroad, such as hams, turkey, chicken, and the like. At that time, the workers earned a minimum wage of 36 cents per hour. 61 years ago, waterfront workers earned a minimum wage of 36 cents per hour. The highest paid was the foreman, who earned 84 cents per hour, while in the United States, longshoremen were making $20, and I'm thinking that's 20 US dollars per hour for handling the same cargo. Now, at a show 61 years ago, what the level of political awareness was, union workers in Belize. Now, I want to finish up with this last paragraph. On the 8th December, the workers decided to go on strike and the port was completely closed down. Various efforts by the labor commissioner, Mr. Dyon, for a compromise failed. On the 18th of December, a ship from Liverpool, England, consigned to BEC, sailed to Commerce Bight without checking with customs in Belize City. Mr. Ralph Fonseca, the financial secretary and controller of customs, J.J. Roberto, issued orders to seize the ship, which stopped the Stan Creek stevedores from breaking the strike. As a result, we returned to the negotiating table, and after a few days, we were successful in getting a wage increase across the board. We're able to secure 12 cents more per hour, plus fringe benefits and the holiday and retirement pay. That's the way I mean, but only the people can save the people. So historically in Belize, that workers advocate for them. They're not the government, they're not the employer. Say, you know what, we really care about the workers and the quality of life what they have. So this is what we propose. This is the minimum, this is the least amount of money they're willing to pay for people who work for them. Now the workers now organize, had a union. And so then kind of backstory important to understand how we get today. We got 4 more minutes. Dyon, make I hear your thoughts, your feelings as I read them 2 pieces.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a historical part of history. It's you just read them. So I think it's related, although not exactly the same of what we're discussing about after the break, because there is room for that type of people pressure, that is for sure. But the conversation that I think we're having is along some of the things that were being discussed, especially towards the latter half of last year. But there is nothing that can be taken away from people movement and labor movements. I'm especially interested in the first reading that you had immediately after the abolishment of slavery, because especially before, because it's always good to remind that our people, especially even in Belize, we were still an active group of people. We weren't so passive as some people would want us to believe that we were. So that's my take on that, for that part.
The excellent point you made is that people resisted the oppression when it came to the labor force. People always resisted. So, and I mean, not just like resisted in a meaningful way to create, I mean, even if it was incremental changes, they saw changes. So it wasn't that Belizean people necessarily, and what really amazed me about people from the 1800s, early 1900s, is that they were knowledgeable. When they sat down to have conversation, they had political awareness. Whereas all these years later, it's like if you just look at how news is reported.
But isn't that bread and circus what caused that? Because when you really think about it, right? Back then you never have as much destruction as you have now. Let me say it like this. Years ago, I used to be a primary school teacher, and then I taught at junior college, and then adjunct lecturing at the university at level at this point in time. And I remember having some conversation with my students, because I remember a day I got very annoyed because I remember going to class and I was all excited. Teachers do this. We get excited about what we're going to teach and we go in. And I had printed out this paper for everybody because like, all right, my econ majors are going to love this one. I think this was when I was teaching at the junior college. And the reaction was, This is too much to read. One page. And I remember got quite annoyed that day. But it reminded me of a time when I had a talk with my students, and I said there was a time when you used to be, well, not we, but our ancestors used to be prohibited from even learning to read because they understood the power knowledge. Now, my colleagues and friends like to tell me my Facebook posts that I like to put up are too long, and in my mind I'm like, they're short. But the aversion we have to seeking knowledge, to learning more. And I think back in those days, even if they weren't reading, there were definitely healthy discussions going on. There were people talking about the issues, what needs to be done, what needs to happen. Now the conversations, with a few exceptions, seems to be far more on the distracted side. And that is a concern. That's a concern for me. That's one of the reasons, like I said at the beginning, why I stay close to media. Because and I'll end this because I see the time. It's like the joint unions just put out I think it was a 10-point press release about a meeting that they had at the government. And there are 10 things that they listed. Some of them are governance issues. One of them is the whole discussions about CEOs versus permanent secretaries. That is such a pivotal thing to our governance structure in this country. And I am amazed that that has not caught wildfire more in the media. And for me, at the Reporter, that has been on my front page, I think, twice since that press release came out. I think as recent as last week, we had a story related to that. No, it's not sexy. It's not somebody died and got shot in the street. It's not the thing that will make you get up and, oh man, I'm gossipy. But that is a significant issue to the large part of some of the governance issues we face here today. And we're not discussing that in any real way. I'll end there because I see it's 11:01. But my point is, we're not a people that focus in on the real issues. We want to be entertained a little bit too much more than we want to be informed to the point of taking action.
And that's why it's important to look back at our past stories to say that's not where we came from. And this aversion to knowledge, and not only that, then there's a class of people that think that they ain't got ownership of the knowledge. And so then tell one particular narrative, and because a lot of we not read, not have one interest to know, they sing the narrative, even if they want to lie, till it become the truth. Then when somebody else or other people come out with different versions, then they're like, nah. They want to have to question that person. I don't know if that's true, because they hear that singular lie for so long. The danger of not telling our own stories and doing the research to find those stories from our ancestors and retell them. Big first segment. Break time. Stay tuned.
Patriots, all people who love them country bad.
Lately, many things have changed. We changed, of course, but we're still the same. During this pandemic, information is our main partner. The most widely known antimicrobials are called antibiotics, but they are useless to fight diseases such as COVID-19 because it is caused by a virus, whereas antibiotics cure diseases of bacterial origin. Therefore, if you feel sick, do not self-medicate. Consult a health professional qualified to write a prescription and take antibiotics only when prescribed.
Smart continues to expand its internet coverage countrywide to help you live a smarter life.
Our villagers are very happy. They are pleased to know that Smart went the extra mile to put a tower in our village so that our villagers can get live streams on their TVs and they can get their kids doing their online classes. I want to say to Smart, thank you for making it possible for us to get internet in Gardenia Village. We really do appreciate it.
Smart continues to take the internet and mobile services to communities across Belize. Now save even more when you bundle your Smart broadband with Smart mobile services. Smart, bringing people together.
We all need a vacation, a break, an escape, a getaway from the ordinary. Have fun and try new things. Create lasting memories. Make your vacation one to remember. Come in today and apply for an easy credit vacation loan at any of our Atlantic Bank branches. We have great interest rates convenient repayment terms, and loan packages for all your traveling adventures. Let us work hard for you, because life should be easy.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
Patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This happy we we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This happy we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. So don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This happy we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This happy we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. So don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This happy we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This happy we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. So don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This happy we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This happy we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. So don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation.
Of Sunday Review for this morning, January 15, 2023, Gregorian cycle. And our guest is Dyon Elliott, the editor-in-chief at the Reporter newspaper. That at the capacity we would have the conversation with her this morning. And the focus really is about the $5 minimum wage. So, you know, like the good teacher Dyon is, we have to start off with some vocabulary. So Dyon, I want to run the definitions and vocabulary because what the economy, what the minimum wage, what the living wage, what are the different tiers of the wage system, what, you know, how people determine the components for say, this minimum wage, good for make people have one decent living or not. Like what are the components? So we have a couple news stories to share to enhance these conversations, and Dyon shares some other information that we hope to share with you that he has in a PowerPoint. Mike is yours, brother.
All right. Well, again, you started off with living wage versus minimum wage. One of the things that I want to start off here, and I want to make this clear, just in case I don't get the opportunity to say it throughout, regardless of what it sounds like I'm saying, I am in support of increasing the minimum wage. This is not a debate, and at least in any intervention anybody have seen me in whatever hat I'm wearing, it has always been in support of an increase. The debate has been about the magnitude and the speed of the increase. And that has been, which is strange, you don't usually have that debate. Usually, like if you look at the US government, and they're having the same ongoing conversation about minimum wage. But if you look at some debates that they are having people debating getting rid of minimum wage, and versus somebody who says increase the minimum wage. So it's a very, very, very different debate, quote unquote debate, that we're having in Belize. It is about, well, the debate is almost done. The government has already increased it as of January 1st. But
well, there was no debate because there was no educational campaign for people to have the knowledge to have.
Hence the reason I said it in air quotes, because I mean, an argument has different expectations of an argument. What we do here, we call it argument, is not argument most of the time. An argument is somebody present a fact-based, evidence-supported premise or premises, more than one, to support a conclusion. Like, YaYa, I think you should wear a jacket because it's cold outside. And it's your job to refute my premise to say, well, I don't need to wear a jacket because whatever logical reason you could give. What I hear a lot of times, what we debate or think we're debating in this country is fallacies. We get ad hominem. We target the person. Oh, well, listen to them because they, whatever reason they give, or pull out a straw man. Distort my argument to make it sound like I talk about something completely different. But anyway, moving on. So that's what we do here. That's why we don't solve issues, because we really don't argue in the denotative academic proper sense of that word. We
Let's
do
take a
different
pin,
things.
Dyon, because I don't want to rush past that, because that is meaningful, is that culturally, and it's because we weren't taught differently. And then not only were we not taught differently, many of us are not willing to relearn differently. So because many of us really do not know, we weren't taught, we didn't see healthy examples of what healthy communication is, that just one that we got hold in our mouth, you say something, I cut you off, I say something, I want proof who right. And it's not understanding that the art of communication is to listen patiently with compassion, to understand. So because that enough we culture, most of the talking would happen from within the home to professional level. When it comes to business development, it's not meaningful.
Yeah.
So that was a big point you made. I want to expand.
And you see that especially in the House of Representatives. It doesn't matter what valid thing the incumbent or the opposition says. A lot of times this happens. Let's say the leader of the opposition gets up and says something on the evidence that makes perfect sense. The comeback is, well, your UDP group may never do this. That's an ad hominem attack. You didn't address the premise, the actual issue raised. You are attacking the messenger. That are one tactic I see. I think I jokingly say the other day, I think most believers have a PhD in using logical fallacies, because that's what we do. We argue from fallacy, not from what the actual issue that we're dealing with. And it's annoying, because you end up talking personalities as opposed to the issue. That's why you and I, all the years we've been at this, because we have our disagreements, but it's never, we try to understand where we're coming from on the facts that we're raising, and we go from there. Anyway, let's get to it, because I mean, it's already 11:12, and I see how time is going here quickly. So you asked me to define the difference between living wage and minimum wage. I'll just read here. This is from a source online that is online. I shared it with you, so you could always share it with your readers. The term living wage differs from the term living wage differs from the terms minimum wage and subsistence wage. We won't talk about subsistence wage. A minimum wage is mandatory. I should just leave it right there and done, right? Determined through legislation. It should meet an individual's basic requirements, and this is the part that but may still imply that a worker relies on government subsidies for additional income. A minimum wage is the legislated minimum, statutory minimum legislated by law, that could be set at a level that may still require government to provide other assistance. For example, I'm using them because it's a country that we are close to both geographically and in terms of admiring their culture, is the United States. They have a federal minimum, well, they have a federal minimum wage, and each state may have their own minimum wage. And they have a program at the federal level known as the Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a government support system, as the name implies, where you as an individual can get house income back to you, for assisting you. And it only works, the lower your income, the better it works for you. Now there's a cap on it, so it's not that much. But the point is, when you combine that at maximum, even though they have a federal minimum wage of $7.25, on the hourly rate, it could actually give you more to $10 and still low. But point is, there are government assistance program. in addition to several other social assistance programs that they actually do have. I won't get into that. I think everybody knows, we've heard some of these things on media about what the government of the US does. And they are considered not the most socially conscious country. I mean, if you ever want to talk about socially conscious, you go to your Southern European countries and your Norways and your Denmarks and these people and your Nordic model people, and you get a different sense. Some of them don't even feel the need for a minimum wage because they have these much robust welfare system. That's a different conversation. But there is a role here where it's understood that this is supposed to be supplemented by state intervention, assisting households. Let me leave that part for a little bit later. A living wage is usually voluntary. As it says here, a living wage is not obligatory, but paid voluntarily. The importance of a living wage lies, among other things, in the fact that it assumes a normal working week. This concept implies avoiding excessive overtime, taking on more jobs, avoiding the risk, and of course, it provides your basic rights, such as food, clothing, shelter, not to suffer deprivation. So it looks at your basic, decent life that is required for a person. Now, the point of why I'm glad you're starting off with this particular distinction between these two terms is because todos, every time, 9 times out of 10, when I hear somebody saying that they're talking about the minimum wage, and then they want to describe what they're talking about, in substance, in essence, what they're talking about really is a living wage. Minimum wage and living wage are two different things. What I'm going to say, well, yeah, I see it showing on the screen, but I don't know if anybody, that looks really small. What I am going to say, though, is that there are global movements that are calling for the narrowing of the gap between minimum wage and the living wage. There are some people calling for a minimum living wage, whereby, and that is a very sound, valid, useful, welcome movement. Notice how I said that and stressed that. Nobody I have met is debating whether or not over time we should narrow the gap between what is the living wage in Belize and the minimum wage. That, I think, even within, I know I put on a hat, but even within the business community, I have not heard anybody objecting to that. The issue that has come up, and if I could, I don't know if the slide is available, if I could bring this up, and then I'll shut up because I feel like I'm going on a while here now. If the slides are available, I would like to go to slide number 5. If it's not, I'll just read it out. But the International Labor Organization, and I'm using them because they're a name that I think we all recognize. I could have picked several different sources, but let's stick with the ILO, a UN body, everybody knows it. I could have gone with the International Organization for Employers, but let's go with the Labor Organization. The International Labor Organization had put out a manual, the minimum wage guidance, policy guidance manual. In this, when they talk about their balanced and evidence-based, keyword being evidence-based approach, they said a balanced approach, and by the way, for viewers and listeners, there is a ILO convention, was the minimum wage fixing convention. That's there. If you read Article 3 of that, it tells you even in the convention what they're referring, basically sets the framework for the balanced evidence-based approach. Balanced evidence-based approach is one that takes into account, and this is for minimum wage, on the one hand, the needs of workers and their family, and on the other hand, economic factors. Such an approach combines both social and economic factors in order to find a level that benefits workers and society without prompting negative effects. Now, this is ILO saying this. So there's a potential for negative effects if you do these things a certain way. A balanced approach is necessary because a minimum wage is a redistributive tool that has both benefits and costs. Too often in Belize, we only want to talk about the benefits and ignore the cost component. And that's a concern. And you don't make policy that way. Right? It could be anything, whether it's phasing out plastics or anything, there's always a benefit and a cost. If set too low, minimum wage will have little effect in protecting workers and their families against unduly low pay or poverty. If set too high, minimum wages will be poorly complied with and or have adverse employment effects. This is the ILO I'm quoting from. So what they recommend, many countries have discovered that a gap exists between legitimate needs of workers and their families and what the economy is capable of paying in terms of minimum wages. It is not possible to eliminate this gap. It is not possible to eliminate this gap in a single minimum wage adjustment, at least not without adverse economic effects. This suggests that there should be a medium to long-term target for this policy, that is, closing this gap in successive, gradual adjustments. So even the International Labor Organization is saying to you, we want to bridge this gap between the needs of workers and what the economy could afford, but we have to be careful how we go about it, because if we do it too fast, too strong, you could trigger adverse economic effects. The final point I want to make on this, and then I'll shut up, YaYa, is the point where, and I keep on using the US because again we know them, but there are studies I've seen from even in Europe area. I could think of one from Slovenia.
I think it'd be good to use things from the region because culturally, especially, we have more in common with them.
Fair enough. But even when you talk about the $15 that the Biden administration is jumping up and down about, they have a Raise the Wage Act. I had put that in the slides, but it doesn't seem like the slides are working. But they have and I think this is what, if you want to borrow something, this is what we should borrow. Doing proper analysis, because their CBO, oh, okay, well, I see part of the, anyway, so you don't need that one right now. I will come back to that. But the US have, if you can show it, I could put up slide number 7, then immediately go to slide 8. The Congressional Budgetary Office in the US, they're a nonpartisan but government office that does their studies on budgetary effects and economic impacts. And in their study, among other things, they point out the benefits. If they phase in their minimum wage change from $7.25 to $15 over a 5-year span, their CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, produced a report that shows that in the year 2025, you will have 17 million people benefiting from the increase. They will be making more than they would have otherwise made. That is good. But that same CBO study said, but you will also have 1.7 persons who will have lost jobs. That's the downside. And they also make the estimates about how it impacts on prices.
1.7 million people?
Yes, will have lost jobs or be jobless. That is from the CBO. Again, these are things you can find online. These things are available. Actually, I had a slide on that, slide 9, but it doesn't matter. To be honest, I can read it right here, where they made that point that, sorry, I quoted the wrong figure. So employment would be reduced by 1.4 million workers, not 1.7. I stand corrected on that. So that is from them. Now, obviously, the benefits are higher. You have 17 million people doing better. Great. 1.4 million would have lost jobs. That's not so great. But the beauty of it is that you now know, okay, if you go ahead with this policy, this is the impact you will have. They acknowledge the possible negative, and that's good. You can plan for the possible negative. And I just wanted to point out that possible negative of losing 1.4 million potential jobs is because they're phasing it in. Their current federal minimum wage is $7.25. If you can show slide number 8, you will see that it goes from $7.25.
We don't have the slides up.
Yeah, so if it goes from $7.25, this is the Raise the Wage Act. You can Google it. You can also find it online. It goes from $7.25 to $9.50. Then that's year 1. Then it goes in year 2 from $9.50 to $11. Then from $11 to $12.50. Then from $12.50 to $14. Then from $14 to $15 in 2025. It's never got implemented, but if it did, that's the plan that they would have had. And under that phasing approach, they're showing you what the potential harm and benefits could be. You tell me, I turn interview slightly, but if you've seen this level of discourse coming as a report to the Belizean people so that you can find publicly somewhere from whether government or any government entity, have you seen that?
Dyon, it's the same thing we said earlier. We don't have a culture of empirical data, of research, of analysis, of contrasting, and then that you have more than one person with this genuine interest, whether they're formally trained or not, that people in political power and influence would listen to, would genuinely listen to with respect, and use that information. That is not the culture. And that's why my position is only the people and save the people. When you have that systemic mindset, then it's up to the people to create the environment. You have one, Krem Center Review have one limited reach. But at least we have one reach when it comes to TV and radio and online, in the absence of, some newspapers may have a position on it, like a really in-depth position on it, that in a language that people can understand, that is people-centered, then this is the next option. Again, looking at people may not be reading, which is why the visual and the audio is just as important, because a lot of people will not read. When you have 60% of your working population with primary school diploma, then it's understandable why people would, maybe listen more or watch something on a screen before they read something. And so it's sad, but you don't notice more on Mika, this is your realm. I don't know where the analysis, like what you share with the CBO, if we have such an entity, any ministry in Belize that consistently does that kind of research, put it in a public space where we can, in a language that we can understand, where we can go and read it. Is there anything like that in any ministry that does any kind of analysis?
Something like that should fall under economic ministries. So you have several economic ministries, but the one at the top of the mountain is the Ministry of Economic Development. And I won't be able to show the press release. No, we did not have that level of. Go ahead, you're
I'm sorry, we have the press release there, not because it's a part of your slide, but because I had sent it as
granted,
a part of our news story. So if you could bring up that, Jada, the press release that was sent out, it was posted on the Government of Belize
I think that's
website.
That's
the
the March
establishment of a minimum wage
task force.
And the point that anyways, so there are some points in this, and I have to give the date because these things matter. This was March 2nd, 2022. The Government of Belize Press Office, establishment of a minimum wage task force. Before we go to break, Dyon, can you point out some, and this again, the why it's so important that the media do the backstory work. Because if we had gone back and look at this press release to what the government commitment was and what the government actually did, that would have been a major talking point. Point out some of the important points in that press release to you, Dyon.
Well, the point here, and I'm using the press release because, it says, it started off telling you on November 25th, 2021, Cabinet requested that the ministry, this is the Ministry of Rural Transformation, basically labor, that the ministry develops a plan for the gradual implementation of the government's commitment of the $5 minimum wage. It goes on to say the government recognizes that any increase, this is the beginning of the third paragraph, that any increase to the present minimum wage would have implications for various sectors. As a result, the phased successive increases, the phased minimum wage increase must be linked to productivity growth and Belize's competitiveness and whatnot. So I'm saying all the right things because at the time, the balance and evidence-based wisdom was obviously in play. There's a July press release that when he hired the consultant, was also talking about the consultant doing a phased-in plan, a gradual implementation of the $5 minimum wage. The task force met. Because I am in my capacity as the editor in the reporter newspaper and not in my other hat, I will only use what was put out in the public. In the public, I have seen articles in the Reporter Business Perspective that talked about what the BCCI had recommended. I have also seen a front page story in the same newspaper where the president of NTUCB is saying that the government jump to $5 is basically ignoring the recommendation of that very same task force. That task force, based on what is in the media, it had said that they would recommend a three-phased increase by 20% in the first instance, 12.5% in a year later, and 11%, which would have brought you to the $5 in 2025. That, if you read the article and even the stuff from the Business Perspective, you would have seen that there was also a reference to the fact that it should be an annual increase thereafter. You had from 2012 to 2020, well, now 2023, before you had another adjustment. The task force recommended that there be annual adjustments never a year should pass without that issue being visited and increased to make sure you never reach in a situation where it doesn't increase again. The wages regulation that was passed doesn't make any reference to the frequency. So that's another thing that the minimum wage task force did that, based on what's in the media, is saying that wasn't followed through on. There's also a reference to a formula guiding the process. That also doesn't show up in the decision that was made. So these are the other half or the other components of the conversation that you really don't get much conversation on. You don't hear this much. And these are the things that, more than just jumping from $3.30 to $5, those are the other areas that should be most concerning to people, because that is saying for continuity that every year, even when you look at the Biden administration raised the wage plan, what they said is that when they hit the $15 or if they had followed through on their plan, if they had hit the $15 in 2025, then thereafter, it would be indexed to what is known as the median wage. So every year there's a fraction of the median wage that will guide their increase. So you could never have a situation where you have so many years passing without an increase. I see you watching the time, so I'll stop right there. But my point is, one last point I want to make on the press release is that task force and the consultant, but the task force was made up of 6 entities. It's listed in the press release: Central Bank, National Bank, the University of Belize, which also was the chair, the Ministry of Economic Development, which is, like I said, the Apex Ministry for Economic Ministries, the National Trade Union Congress and Belize, and the Chamber of Commerce. So the narrative is always about the business community, but the people seem to ignore the fact that there were 6 groups represented on that committee, and that task force recommended something, and it appears from what you're seeing in the media, the government didn't really pay much water to what they recommended.
Respect. We'll take a break. Stay tuned.
Patriots, all people who love them country bad love.
How can we support the emotional well-being of older adults during COVID-19? During the COVID-19 pandemic, and particularly while in quarantine, individuals, including older adults, may become more anxious, angry, stressed, agitated, or withdrawn, especially those who need healthcare assistance or have cognitive decline or dementia. Here are 4 strategies that can help you in supporting an older adult during this difficult time. 1. Communicate information and listen. Present with accurate, simple, and accessible information and facts about the COVID-19 outbreak, its progression, treatment, and effective strategies to prevent infection. Listen patiently to their needs and concerns. For older people with mild cognitive impairment or early stages of dementia, inform them of what is happening within their capacity and provide support to ease their anxiety and stress. 2. Promote positive mental and emotional health. Provide access to available mental health and psychosocial support services, also known as MHPSS services, for older adults, and communicate when and how they can access them. Help older people keep regular routines and schedules as much as possible. You can also help them create new ones, including regular exercising, cleaning, daily chores, singing, painting, or other activities. Facilitate regular communication between older adults and their friends and families. 3. Help with medical needs. Make sure that older adults have at least up to 1 month of all the regular medicines that they may require. Explain how to use protective devices in a clear, concise way. Always be respectful and patient. 4. Assist with daily activities. Provide older people with details related to how and where they can get practical help if needed, like calling a taxi, dropping off supplies, having groceries delivered, and requesting medical care, as well as information on any locally available social support programs and services. For more information, consult the webpage of the Pan American Health Organization, www.paho.org/coronavirus.
Amandala is now online. You can now access Amandala's midweek and weekend issues online by logging on to our website at amandala.com.bz/news and joining our membership portal today. There's 5 easy steps to get unlimited access to weekly e-paper, archive publications, and a host of other exclusive contents. Number 1, go to Amandala's website. Number 2, navigate to subscribed areas. Number 3, choose a membership level. Number 4, check out using our secured portal. Number 5, log into the members only section. Telephone numbers 501-280-4703 or 202-4477. Fax us at 501-222-4702, or you could email at amandalapress@yahoo.com or amandalapress@gmail.com. Amandala, all power to the people.
Alert! Alert! It's a deal alert! It's a Benny's deal alert!
At Bennett's, you will find deal alerts on a
That our benefit are we the people supposed to pay?
The funding you pay now for when you get old, you got funding for college, for your future.
If you miss some days from work, they should have compensated for that.
As an artist, I'm not really sure because I work for myself.
What is Social Security? Social Security is not a tax. Social Security is a very small investment in you, the worker. It's an investment that you can count on now or in the future. It is designed to replace part of your income from wages when you get sick, get injured on the job, have a baby on the way, become disabled, or even when you pass away. And even then, the widow and your kids, if under 16 years or under 21 years and in school, obtain survivor's pension. And after a lifetime of working, you can rest assured you will have a monthly retirement income. Social Security, safeguarding you, your family, your future.
Patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This happy week, we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This happy week, we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This happy week, we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This happy week, we da fear. Nobody.
Final segment of Sunday Reviews. Do I Dyon have to come back? Dyon Elliott, the editor-in-chief at the Reporter newspaper. You know how you go during break, you have I'm like, Dyon, I don't hear, I mean, and you could never know everything. You always miss something. But I don't hear it on the talk shows. I don't hear it in Dalavan. People talking about the government of Belize said that this is what the task force will do. And then the task force made recommendations and the government didn't do it. I didn't hear the government come out and address it to say why they didn't. I didn't hear the people that you said were on that task force come out in a strong way to let, through the media or through a press release, know that, listen, let me be very clear on what happened. That's why I'm always wondering who sits on these task force, because if somebody like me with a task force, what the Belizean people may hear may be very different from what I want to say.
Go to the reporter. Sorry, I know I depend on Krem show, but go to go to the reporter.bz. Type in the story, and this is the headline. This is the name of the story. GOB ignores minimum wage task force, implements $5 rate immediately. NTUCB president. The first paragraph in that story reads, the government of Belize, which formally announced Thursday that the minimum wage will increase to, this was, by the way, the date of the story is December 23rd. The government of Belize, which formally announced on Thursday that the minimum wage will increase to $5 in January 23, has ignored the recommendation of the minimum wage task force. National Trade Union Congress of Belize's President Luke Martinez explained. I won't read the rest of the story because, again, so one member, well, two members of that task force have been out there. One of them, the public loves to hate because, you know, it's employers and whatever the case may be, and all these narratives that go along with that, failing to recognize that, and I sent you a graphic recently, because it's unfortunate that this can't be shown. I wish, if anything else, this could have been shown. Because when we talk about the private sector in Belize, I think we conjure up images in our head about, you know, the Monsantos and the Facebook and the Amazons and these big, large multinational corporations. When in this Okay, seems like I lost YaYa, but you're still there. Okay, you're muted, YaYa. You're muted, YaYa. You're saying something, but you're muted.
I'm sorry, you continue to talk. I'm trying to see if I could go to the slide and screenshot
Don't-
it and send it.
don't-
So you just can,
Well, okay, well, that's the article that's
right,
being
but
shown
you
on the
continue
screen.
with your train of thought.
Right? What I'm saying is that when we think about the private sector, we summon up these large multinational corporation images in our head. But in Belize, the majority of our businesses are micro and small. 80%, if you whether you use it from the number of employees they have, because micro could be defined in Belize as people with 5 employees or less. 80% of our businesses in this country are of that size, micro. These are sometimes one man, one owner, one employee, less than 5. Then the next group is the next 15% is 6 to 19 or 6 to 20. That's just small. So you combine those two, you're talking easily about 95% of your business being just micro and small. If you do it by revenue, the numbers don't change that much. So you're talking well over 90% of businesses in the country are very small operations, small bakeries or small shops, small, very micro and small, the tacos vendors, these type of things, the tortilla factory, right? So again, there's a need for appreciation of who the other side of this equation is and whether or not all these businesses could have afford the changes that came down on them. And anyway, that's the question that should be asked. And it's not, oh, we hate business people or we don't want to be. Those are real questions, and it's not unique to just this country. There's a reason why everybody that does this stuff does a phase in. That's the graph right there. Thank you very much. Well, that's based on headcount. That first bar that's all the way to the top is 80%. That's the number of 80% of our business are micro. Either less than 5
Dyon,
people.
you could say micro, we don't know what the hell that means. But the bottom of the graph is say 1 to 5 employees making $75,000 or less. So that the 80%, 80%, what are the whole number? 80% that how much represent how much businesses in Belize?
So the number varies. If you look at SSB data, they want to tell you about 12,000. This data is from SIB, Statistical Institute of Belize. So SIB will tell you have just below 8,000 businesses. I think they use the data from Belize Tax Service. If you look at SSB, they have you at 12,700 something, if my memory serves me correct. As a matter of fact, an interesting thing that we in the media should do is look at the fact that the number of businesses, if my memory serves me correct, fell from 12,000 something to 11,000 something in, I think, 2021, from 2020 to 2021. It's an interesting little statistical trivia there. Talking about the health of, you should look at the new business density for this country where it has been trending down. We don't have in terms of new businesses popping up, but sticking here, let's say we stick with the SIB number. So you're talking about 8,000 businesses. So you're saying about 80% of that is micro, meaning a business that have less than 5 employees and gross, when I talk about expenses come out yet, revenue of $7,000 to $5,000 or less, right?
Okay,
so,
most of those businesses are a part of one or of the 2 formal organizations that represent business interests, like the Chamber of Commerce and the other.
Yeah, they represent the report.
No, I understand, but because that you give the graph.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the conversation based on the graph.
All
that 80%, do you know? Because what I look for, brother, is I'm going back to the task force.
The answer.
And if these people voices are represented.
The answer is yes. All right. You have an interview with the Chamber of Commerce and they will break down to you what their membership are. You will be surprised to find out the narrative that is like when people that come to me. I try to practice my curl, but it doesn't work too good. But the people that come to me and say that the report.
Hell, your curl now work good. Stop it here.
I don't have the real curl, girl. But they and I just recently joined the National Creole Council. Plug for the National Creole Council if you're a Creole out there and you want to join. I don't know how, but anyway, moving on. I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? The fundamental truth is that majority of the businesses are micro, right? Next group, that's small. That is the private sector. And we run around the place to say it all the time. The MSMEs are the backbone of the economy, the backbone of the economy. You have to also consider the health of that backbone. How healthy is that backbone? When you have businesses where they talk about how they're in the red or the break, barely the break even, then the same inflation that affects the consumer, you have to recognize, I know you're attempting to go into price gouging, but there are legitimate price increases bearing down on businesses in the economy.
But Dyon, because we are not privy to that information in real time. This is what, and that's why I'm saying, who are the people who are saying they represent everyday working class people? And if the narrative that they go with is the genuine voices of our people, that's what I just say. The stakeholders not to represent for we interests. I don't care who, because we out there to feel. So I just say, if at basic that you know to communicate the kind of information we need to communicate to we right now. We are not ignorant people. Well, I'd hope we could reason, we could understand our situation. But this is for we lens. I can't tell, no care what school to go, what statistics, and this is what we.
But how you?
Just gonna finish this start there. This is what we feel out the road, right?
Yes.
We done not to make enough money.
Good.
But what we say with the people that we say got bag of money, the people that own businesses, we say they live in a certain kind of adequate house, more than one than got. We say they got type of vehicle. We say that children they go to good schools. We say they go on vacation. So only to say one thing, but what we the sick and we live in the communities, then people related to we. Something different.
You remind me of when I was growing up, right? And I grew up in a certain community, and as a young child, I used to find it strange when you come across a student or a classmate of mine who raised up with a biological man and biological father. And for years, I raised up to say, well, most of families in Belize are single mother and single parent households. And then I got to, somebody shared the statistic with me and actually showed that actually only 1 out of 10 homes. I mean, that's that the person gave to me at the time. And I said, but that reflect what I see, because in my
1 out of 10 homes, that's single parent?
According to the statistic back then. But my point is, I remember telling the person, just like you just said, that I just feel that I just say that because in my community, most of where they say that. My point is, in our immediate communities, certain things may look overly large than they really are. Statistically, the majority of businesses in any economy, especially this one, is mostly micro. But these are not.
We know that people could get statistics to validate any position they want. So make it be real over the top.
So then I will challenge you, but then for challenge the SIB data and the SSB data for go there and go do.
No. You know what my challenge? I'm a community worker. I had panic ground, and for we people, especially African descendants, racialized as black, used to beg for money, the licky behind government, sell out their vote.
Okay, good. So that's the way I want to go to.
Unemployed.
Yes, that's the way I want to continue.
And you look for like the call centers where no union. I'm not going to tell about the people that don't want to organize the union.
No. I'm not going there.
You either agree to their separation contract or they got to know that people will take the job.
Good. Yeah. I said this time only 30 minutes left. So maybe we'll go there. Because you're touching on something that I think we want to talk about. The unionizing part of the workers, we need to bring on the NTUCB or whoever else from the union. But you are right. 100% right, that more needs to be done. Earlier in the show, I talked about how we gone from 33.5% of our people being below the poverty line. And we could have a debate if the poverty line is the best measure, should do multidimensional poverty. We could have that conversation. Let's just stick with the income-based statistic for now, all right? Which is not the best, but it's one of them that we easily could grab. 33.5% in 2002, 41.3% in 2009. 52% using 2018 data. That is a problem. And while, again, as I said at the beginning of the show, the minimum wage is a part of the solution, it is a small part. What we need to be talking about is where are the social safety net programs being strengthened? Where are our social protection initiatives? Where are our graduation programs? Well, I'm going to clarify what graduation program is. This these type of programs that YaYa, they come from a poor household. So they will give you one type of stipend, I don't know, let's throw out a number, maybe $500 a month for a household to keep things going. But a hard condition for that program is that you have to be in a training, you have to be getting upskilled. And the program have a timeline, whether it's 3, 6 months, a year, whatever the case may be. At the end of that program, you need to be skilled, either get one productive, not just any job, a productive job, or you get your own business started. You come off the program, make room for the next person's name to come on. Those are the type of social protection programs that should be more robust in this country. We have a boost program, which is decent. It's a conditional cash transfer. What's the coverage for that program? What are we doing in terms of assisting vulnerable households with the higher prices of everything right now, really? I told you this yesterday when we had a conversation. I am always amazed to see even Mr. Conservative IMF is telling the countries around the world, guys, you need to put money in our households and provide price subsidies. When you hear the IMF, they talk about subsidy for households and prices, things gone awry, right? So where are those programs? Where are those assistance programs coming from the state? So those are the type of things that we need to see more of. I'm saying more because there are some, but there needs to be more investment in those areas. And I think that's really what the conversation should be about. How do we provide assistance through the state apparatus for our people in a more robust way, in a better way? So I don't have to be driving and seeing people hold up signs, I need money, please donate, please, because I need money for XYZ surgery. That thing bothers me every time I see it, because and then the narrative will be, of course, we don't got the money for it, we broke fiscal responsibility. The whole narrative comes out now. But that, when you hear people coming out and saying they need to do some type of CAT scan or some type of MRI or whatever the case may be, but can't do it at the National Referral Hospital, have to go to private hospitals. Those are the type of things that the Belizean people need to be talking and holding their government accountable for, not just the people, because we get political too darn much. Not because of PUP or UDP. You don't need to forget their colors, the government. We're a government to do and hold them to that. In addition to, yes, increase the minimum wage. I don't think it was good sound policy to jump from $3.30 to $5 without proper research to guide that. I think that is irresponsible from a policy making economics standpoint. I think you should have done the more gradual increase, as we're hearing the task force was recommending. That way you can see what happens and you can mitigate the impact, and then if any bad thing happens, you can come in as a government and cushion it a lot easier. That's my view. Obviously that ship has sailed, but that still is not going to solve the problem. If you tell me we have 52% persons living below the poverty line, then you're telling me over 200,000 Belizeans are in that position. So that means that we still need to see stronger social programs coming out to assist our people.
There was so much more we wanted to talk about, but I definitely, even in writing policy, oftentimes the people writing the policy, they're not a lived experience where the policy will impact. So oftentimes, like African women, there's no policy on African women and African reparations. And so even if you have somebody who looks like an African person or African descendant, in that group of people writing it, and it's not African centered, people example, I don't know for the tongue, you say more once. But tell her, like, these people are up, and I have to blame the Belizean people for not hold with self and the state accountable. This is an absolute, I mean, this is the people that was supposed to the top for we, my position is not genuinely looking out for our best interests. And as much as the state wants to say, another why we need to hold the state accountable, they don't got the money. There's no auditor general report that is current per se if they don't have the money. There's no integrity commission where they operate as they should operate. For certain people never got in bag of money before they get in a government, and now they got in bag of money for to live the lifestyle where they live. For no tell we that they don't got no money for the social service, that we the people are Belize responsible for that. We that the diaspora, they're not the conversation, but you know, there's a large group of Belizean population who simply want to get in at the status quo group. They want somebody dirty money. They want somebody dirty benefits. It's not that they genuinely care for people and want more Belizean people have one decent level of living. And we Belizean people have to start telling ourselves the truth. What value systems do we have as individuals or Belizeans that we're living when nobody to watch? What kind of human being we?
And I don't see what you're asking for showing the screen, but we started off this conversation. You had asked me something, and I had said one of my pet peeves is about the fact that a lot of times you have to go to these clinics, these area representative clinics to get assistance. And I mentioned earlier that that is an issue for me, right? Because that is the basis for conflict of interest and a lot of the shenanigans that happens. You won't be surprised to know that this is where we talk about why we need as a society to improve in terms of campaign finance reform, right? Why we need to properly institutionalize social protection systems and not this thing where you have to line up in front of a representative. The only reason you should be lining up in front of a clinic or a surgery, as it's called in the UK, is that person as a representative is a legislator. Like if you want, whenever they talk about the minimum wage, the marijuana bill, for example, if you had a strong view either for or against that, you're supposed to line up in front of your area representative as a legislator and say to them, this is why I want you talk for me as a member of your constituency. That's how this thing should work. Now the pushback on that will be, oh, but we're a small economy, and yes, that's how it should work, where the institutions are taking care of the social needs and blah 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 without the political involvement. But we're small and resources. Look, we have, if I want to see, even if the incremental starts on this, we need to start seeing some changes in this area, because as long as this stays like this, a large part of the poverty that you're seeing is connected to the way we do politics in this country, where you talk about the vote buying. That's a large part of our issue. Where are we going to hold the ministers and the politicians accountable to say, listen, we don't want to hear you to talk about you and give me a load of sand in my yard. I want you to talk about how you make it easier in the system where all of we could benefit from the resources of a state, irrespective of my political whatever. I should never hear stories, and these are true stories, and I know you probably hear these stories, where you had in the past people who get a scholarship under one government, and when government changes, they take them away, they take scholarship. That should never happen in any sensible democracy. People lose jobs. I've seen interviews where people are losing jobs, and the minister involved is actually saying, and refer back to the bar saying the same thing. So both sides are guilty of this stupidness of firing people, and my people have to eat kind of nonsense. We're one people. One government was supposed to represent one people. Only 400,000 away. It's not so hard to do. So these are the conversations.
420,000, man. That 20,000 people are like keep out. That 420,000.
Yeah. My point is that we are too small for this divide and conquer thing. Well, you would possibly agree with learn from the colonial masters. Look at countries like Kenya. There was a book I was reading out of Kenya, Our Turn to Eat, written by Makela Rang, I think her name was. Right? If you read that book, you feel like you read some carbon copy of what we see here. The only difference is in terms of political and UDP and UDP tribes, we talk about literal tribes. But when one group gets in, a finite time for eat and everybody else is left out in the wilderness. That is what's killing us. We need to stop dividing up ourselves like this and make we discuss policy on the numbers, preferably. I hear you about the whole lived experience, and that's a valid point. But I also think we need to balance that more with actually looking at data so that when we make the decisions, even if we acknowledge that there are going to be negatives, we can mitigate and plan for those negatives.
What I push back to is that oftentimes these models that we're using are primarily European concepts. The majority of the world people are people of color. Europeans weren't the primary dominant culture all the time. And so we have to start looking at some of our indigenous ways. But when you have people who are totally colonized with a colonized degree, not even open to understanding there are other ways to manage, to connect human beings and the environment, when people are not even open to that mindset at all, like totally cemented. Before I go, I have to say, On the Andre Gray matter, Andre Gray is my personal brother. We got in the Alsane school together for a period of time. And until there's evidence to show me that what that brother said about himself is not true, I am in solidarity with Andre Gray. What I want said to Belizean people, and I had to pay attention to every single one I know, what they say. And I know I forget to know. A part of my position is, the root of this is anti-Blackness. When you have people of color, majority Belizeans, African descendants, racialized as Black, there's no group of people in Creole in the world, none. But because you want to be anything but African descendant, racialized as Black, you want to accept European classification of a people. One, and this brother want extremely melanated, clearly African descendant, racialized as Black. One. Two, when you have a group of people, primarily African descendant and indigenous descendant, who for their Godhead, that one European image, there's a slim, these people cannot in their mind conceptualize and accept that an African brother, descendant Belizean, looking like Andre Gray, could genuinely be a genius. I know they get into the semantics of what the media they push. I just say, and this whole part is really difficult for I work with Belizean people, that a mindset that they're able to say, listen, I know I grew up the same one white figure as the Godhead, and even though they say it don't matter, if it never matter, they don't mean I have it there. So stop telling yourself like it matter. That's why they keep it there. Right now on Facebook, when I could go and look and say where King Leopold write and tell them missionaries when they go in the Congo, he write it, he say, I don't make it up. It's written. So when you have people who are enough for their mind, they can't even visualize one creator will look like them, then it's difficult to accept yourself. And so for me, the root of this conversation is anti-Blackness, especially when you look from what part of this conversation originated, who start this talking. And the person who start the talking, now one of them people throw a stone or pull their hand, they never come out or own what they say. But as the week go by, more will be revealed. I just said to Belizean people, check on the change. Ask yourself why you so quick for drag down one Black brother. Why we so quick for drag down each other? We're wrong, we do wrongs, we're human beings. But my goodness, look how much I want to line up for drag down the brother. If anybody come forward and say, I in a solidarity with Andre Gray, if you say it, I never hear you know. I never see you know. Let the record show. I 10 toes deep for Andre Gray. And you know when people need you? When then they down. When I'm incarcerated, that's when I'm in need Belizean people, and it come true for me. That's why I work for them, because when I'm in need, you know, I'm wrong. I did it dirtiness, I wrong. But not because I do that, mean that I can't continue to do other work. I've continued to do other work. So I just say, especially I don't want to like say a Christian, no dirty. Because that according to the Christian faith, that people who are dirty on the need, they're not the same one, that the dirty one they on the need, that the one that was the wrong. But all I need for the castigate people and they make fun. Look on Facebook, I don't want to get meme, the African people at the time, the Black people do it too. Like I tell up Belizean people that the hardest set of people I ever work with, I tell you no. But it show the level of the mental enslavement. But I don't watch you know. Let me say that. Final thoughts, but I had for days that bone stuck in my throat. When I tell you no, Dyon my brother, 10 toes deep. That don't mean one time things good at Dyon my brother, especially when things bad, Dyon my brother. I will tell Dyon myself, but that my brother, that's what community is about. Anyways, so we got to say before I go over that.
You really have to get off your chest though. There's a lot. I mean, I doubt we covered everything that we wanted to talk about today, but
come back, man. You're done your hiatus and not being on Sunday Review. You'll come back. We look forward to you.
Gotcha. No, I think here's what I will say. There are reasons why we have experts in different fields. I'm not an expert in anything. So no one think Dyon Elliott, they say, expert economist. I have studied the area, and so I'm a student and continue to be a student of the area. So what I am trying to encourage my fellow Belizeans to do, in my economic mind, in my business mind, and definitely from a journalism media mind, which is this news review show, demand more of your politicians, of your media. That's what I want to say. That's the angle where I want to make my closing parts from. Because it is not enough. It can't be enough that we are salivating and engrossing ourselves and consuming. The media has to be a balance of entertainment and facts. That's a given. Somebody coined the term edutainment once upon a time. I worry, however, sometimes I feel like we tip too much more on the entertainment side and little too much emphasis on the fact part, the facts, FACT, and the policy part. We have some real issues that are fixable in this country. And I encourage everybody listening here to start looking more closely to those things and demanding of everybody, the media and the government, to start looking more seriously at those issues and pushing in that direction for us to address them. And the media has a key role to play in that. So that's where I would want to leave it from that point of view. That's my bias. I want to see national development, and the media has a huge role to play in that. So we have to up the game.
Thanks, Dyon. I really value that. I push back on this again, fact checking, because fact no makes something true. I am in the truth checking because
before you go power soapbox again, because I know time to go. I just want to give you a simple example. Several times throughout 2022, there was a particular minister that went on several TV interviews, including on yours. Not your show, but in the network you had, and says that the Constitution does not say equal in terms of the redistricting. It says effective. Now, effective representation is a lovely concept in the political science space. Nothing wrong with it. But the interesting thing is that in Section 90 of the Constitution literally says equal. And my point when I talk about fact check, this is where I'm coming from. That never require you do not investigate, if anything. Not to pull up the Constitution, look at Section 90. Oh, see there. Sir, Minister, Mr. Minister, sorry, due respect. This can't be correct. No, to his credit, I think post the judgment that came out the other day, I have seen that same minister in a very recent interview refer to, in a sense, saying equal. So maybe that problem has now been resolved. But throughout 2022, I saw at least 3 or 4 different interviews where the wrong thing was said, and that was not pushed back on for a simple fact check by representatives in the media. That's what I mean. Things like that. And I talk about witch hunts and those type of things. I'm talking about making sure if the minimum wage thing, since that was the topic today, the narrative is Chamber of Commerce, this Chamber of Commerce, that you see that in the media. But there was a task force of 6 people. So where is the reference to the task force or the members of the task force? Why is it only one entity being singled out? That was basic fact check stuff. I see one propaganda thing already starting about the government, and this might sound like I defend the current government, but facts are facts. The press release came out last week about the import duty on condensed milk going up. I already see something coming out for political purposes, turning that as part of a larger political propaganda campaign. We're a part of CARICOM. CARICOM has rules. All of the rules and it were summarized in a very well-worded press release that explains that when a CARICOM member state can supply the region, there is a thing known as the common external tariff that has to be increased, and all member states, everybody who are part of CARICOM, Belize, Guyana, whoever, has to meet that CET. So when I saw that included in a political press release, then I'm saying, but man, we could do better than that. So the media now have to make sure we educate the Belizean people so that we don't run around the place with the wrong idea, at least in that one small part. That's what I talk about with fact checking.
Fair enough. The concern again is the mindset of Belizeans who would include media workers and media owners. The mindset. And that's going to take a while because the person will need to be willing to acknowledge there's something not right about how I think and how I process or how I understand. And it bleeds into the type of stories or So like the enslavement of our people is real mentally at all levels, and we need to start to tell our truths. And so when you have people who not follow the status quo, who to challenge the status quo, meaning things as they are now, then again, that person could be ridiculed, you attack that person, but that our reflection of you. Like this story with Andre Gray, that's a reflection of the individual journalist and the media house. That the way, as hurtful as this is for Andre, what for me is showing me who these people are. So I respect, thanks so much again, Dyon Elliott, the editor-in-chief at the Reporter newspaper. Expect Dyon to come back more, because we definitely have to stretch this $5 minimum wage conversation even more. There's a lot we didn't touch, and it still has meaning for many Belizeans. At the security booth at Zinc Fence, it may be Shane Flowers or Solomon. I don't know who it is. Respect for holding it down. In Krem Television, the master chief operator in the control room, Jada Anderson. I really, as usual, I work Jada. Thanks so much, Jada. Appreciate it, sis. Downstairs in Krem Radio, I believe. I don't know who. I don't know who's in Krem Radio. Jada, text me and tell me who in Krem Radio. Okay, it is Larry G. Okay, so it's Harry Barcelona, security guard Harry Barcelona, and Larry G in Krem Radio. We're going over and leave it. Thanks, sister, brothers, Belizean people. Thanks so much for continuing to support Krem Sunday Review, all Zinc Fence products. We really value the support, and this show will repeat at 3:30 this evening on Krem Television. You can watch it at your convenience on Krem Television Facebook page. Remember, under the people and save the people. Hey, listen, the theme song for Curly, Belizean artist living in the United States. My backdrop, go to Kebe's Corner on Facebook. Kebe's Corner provided the African print for my background. Until next Sunday, I want to stay warm.